This case is one of my favorite examples of how the media can take an obscure, niche interest and blow it up into a massive phenomenon. In this case, it's a 1980 horror film called Tourist Trap. Now, the plot of the movie isn't especially original. A group of friends go on vacation, only to find themselves hunted down by a murderous maniac. But there are two things that make this movie stand out. First is the setting, the isolated, mist-covered town of Cumberland Gap. Second is the villain. His name is Slater, and he collects souvenirs from his victims. He skins them and turns them into wax replicas. He keeps them in his house of mirrors, which he thinks are real people. Now, to those of you already screaming at your screens about how this plot is way too similar to another slasher film released 5 years earlier, Tourist Trap actually came first. It was conceived in 1977 after director David Schmoller saw a news report about a serial killer in West Virginia. The killer was collecting newspaper clippings from his victims, which reminded Schmoller of a folk tale he heard as a kid. The story was about a woman who killed her lover and then stuffed him inside a hollowed-out copy of Hamlet. Schmoller thought this would be a great concept for a movie, so he wrote the screenplay for Tourist Trap. After reading the script, horror icon Robert Englund wanted it. When the movie was released in 1980, it was a modest success. Audiences liked it more than critics did, and it became England's second most popular film behind only Friday the 13th. Unfortunately, Tourist Trap has been largely forgotten over the years, possibly because it's so close to other slashers. That being said, the film has a cult following. There's a sequel coming out next year. So, let's take a look at some of the most memorable moments from the original. As our story begins, we meet a pair of lovers, Annie and Slater. He's a drifter who fixes TVs for a living, and she's an aspiring writer who longs for a simpler life. They drive through the countryside looking for somewhere to settle down. As they pass by the town of Cumberland Gap, they decide to stop for gas. While getting money from the ATM, Annie slips and falls. She hurts her knee and has trouble walking, so Slater buys her a pair of crutches. At the general store, Annie meets a kindly old woman named Helen. She tells Annie that Cumberland Gap is a special place, free from the troubles of the modern world. All of the townspeople are happy here, or so they seem. Annie and Slater soon find a cabin they like, and they buy it without even asking what's in the basement. The next day, Annie goes exploring while Slater fixes up the cabin. She stumbles upon a carnival run by a sinister man named Wilcox. He owns a funhouse full of mirrors, and Annie is curious to check it out. As she walks through the maze of glass, she sees figures moving about. She thinks they're just mannequins, but they turn out to be real people. They're played by locals dressed up as deformed sideshow freaks. Wilcox watches from the shadows, and he's delighted to see Annie's reaction. Later that night, Annie and Slater are having dinner when they hear a knock at the door. Annie opens it, and standing there is a cop. He introduces himself as Sheriff Tuttle, and he tells them they need to come see something hilarious. The entire town has gathered around a bonfire, and they're burning an effigy of Annie, apparently. They believe she's a witch. The sheriff says they should probably leave. He doesn't want them to get hurt, but Slater refuses to let a couple of hicks ruin his vacation. The sheriff leaves, and everyone in the town slowly disappears into the darkness. Slater feels a sense of dread wash over him. He grabs Annie's hand, and they run into the woods. You've seen any number of slashers. You know where this is going. Slater and Annie stumble into the funhouse, and they hide in the mirrors. When the lights come on, they find themselves trapped in a cage. Wilcox is watching them from a distance, and he believes they're now part of his freak show. Now, I won't spoil exactly what happens next. I highly recommend the movie if you haven't seen it in a while, but I will say that Wilcox isn't the only threat the couple faces. The main villain of the story is actually someone else entirely. And the twist ending is truly shocking. Thanks for watching.